Hi there, a grey day in Kent. I'd like to get to the heart of why I'm doing these videos and why I believe they're important and what I'm hoping to achieve. And perhaps the place to start is to look at awareness. And there are several elements or variations of awareness, but let's start with awareness of what's going on in the world. Now, at the base level, as I'm sure we're all familiar, you've got maybe 80 to 90% of the world who get their information from MSM, mainstream media. They see the narrative. We've had a terrorist threat for 20 years that the Americans and West have been combating. We've had a terrible contagion that has threatened us, and fortunately by somewhat dire methods, the threat has been controlled, and courtesy of the vaccine, we're now protected. And now Putin has gone doolally and has invaded Ukraine, and the world is facing the threat of this aggressive dictator. Then there's maybe 10 or 20% who, should we say, are a little bit more willing to look beyond the surface of the narrative and to go behind it. Now, I would point out why I was hesitating there is actually within the 80 to 90%, there may be as many as a third of them maybe actually don't really buy it. But they won't actually take any action to discover a deeper narrative because they've got lives, they've got jobs. At the end of the day, they don't like it, but they've got to get on with their life. So what distinguishes what I'd say, our friends are the kind of people that have friended me on Facebook, have followed my videos on Peerless Reads. We're people who are willing to look at the information available, whether it's data or statistics or published reports or strategy papers, to see that there's actually a deeper narrative going on, and that the facts may contradict the mainstream narrative, or they may reveal agendas behind the scenes by people who want to manipulate us, the elite, the governments, the hyper-billionaires. And then within that sort of 10%, there's perhaps a few within there that I'm going to call the super truthers, though that has a slightly specific connotation. But there's the people that actually do the research, do the analysis, the sort of thing I did for COVID and road safety and 9/11 and whatever. In a sense, we become the source or the old. I hate the old the because the conspiracy theory, connotations of alternate media, but yes, we should we say we enhance the information available by doing analysis and showing what is out there. And people who do that pretty much full time, they're the ones I'm going to call the super truthers. I did what I felt was appropriate and necessary for COVID, but it's not going to be my career. And the super truthers, in a sense, become the mainstream media for people who want to see behind the scenes and get a more accurate picture. And so that might be sort of 1% of the population, which is probably gross exaggeration. And then above that, we get the players, the elite, the billionaires, the businessmen. And they are actually designing the narrative and instigating maybe even instigating the crises as we understand. But certainly instigating the policies that they can implement from these crises. And so we have this pyramid of awareness, and of course, the very capstone. Maybe there really is just a very small cabal at the top, the ones that don't make it to the media. I think, as a rule of thumb, if you know their name, if you see them in the media, they are a lieutenant, a captain, a major, perhaps, but they are not the generals or the godfathers of the situation, the movers and shakers, and good candidates for the discreet and hidden, not entirely hidden, perhaps, but behind the scenes, you've got at the top of the pyramid, perhaps you've got the R&R families. But it doesn't really matter too much, because what we have this awareness pyramid. Now, I think it's fair to say that most of us would, in the 10%, we would perceive that we are in a crisis. In fact, in some ways, it's a crisis that seems inescapable, because we have an agenda, whether it's Agenda 2030 or whatever, or New World Order or whatever. But the bottom line is that the people who own most of the world seem unsatisfied even with that, and want to take it still further and own all the world. Or as Klaus Schwab puts it, you will own nothing and be happy. Well, yes, it may be that we're going to own nothing, but happiness, I think, is going to be elusive. And we have to come to a decision within ourselves: do we feel this is appropriate? Is this the world we want to live in? And obviously, for many of us, the answer is no. And the question is then, what do we do about it? Well, obviously, I think we've all hoped for mass awakening. The reason we need that, obviously, is that the political system, the nominal system by which we are supposedly ruled, is the democratic one, which works on the majority of votes. And if 80 to 90% of the people are, as we would put it, asleep, obviously that's a bit of a problem. Because as long as they buy into the narrative, they will vote for and support someone who is selling them the narrative. So there is really no hope or appears to be no hope of overcoming a system where a very small fraction of the population own pretty much everything, own the levers of power, own the media, and can spew out their narrative. And it doesn't matter what we say or what we do in terms of finding out in our research. As we've discovered, the opportunity to persuade other people is basically, it's essentially non-existent. So, what are we down to? Well, I have absolutely no objection if a big glowing hand comes down and squashes the New World Order. I have no objection to alien invasion, as long as it's a real and beneficial one. I really don't mind what happens. I don't mind if we all sort of suddenly become so much smarter and aware. That's wonderful. But what are we going to do in the meantime, just on the off chance that none of those occurs? Because I'm not entirely happy and willing to just sort of sit back and figure, well, there's nothing we can do. And so the purpose of this channel is to highlight that actually there are things we can do. And the first of which is to even recognize that where we are is suboptimal, which is whence fair and better world. It is obviously going to be important to keep abreast of what is going on. So the super truther layer is a critical element, in a sense, replacing in our world the MSM, mainstream media. And I have some thoughts on how we can leverage that and increase that effectiveness, and we'll discuss that at some point. But at this point, the biggest issue and the reason for the creation of the channel is that without a sense of hope, without a sense that we actually could get out of this, it's going to be pretty depressing. And of course it becomes somewhat aimless, because the best we're doing is surviving, but not really in a very happy way. Now, I've emphasized that in comments and elsewhere, that the first thing, as I pointed out, is that we are not the first people to live under a tyranny, or whatever you want to call it. But what distinguishes the current crisis is that never before has the technology existed to exert control to the degree that is possible today, which is essentially absolute. When you get to proposed and actually implemented social credit systems, where if you say the wrong thing on social media, you may not be allowed to go shopping. I mean, we're already on, well, you can't go on vacation if you're not, maxed. Is a punitive system where your very ability to feed yourself is compromised because you said the wrong thing on Facebook. That is unprecedented. The cashless society, everything monitored, everything controlled. So this is a non-trivial issue. It's going to take something. It may take rather more than our lifetimes. I don't know. But the most important thing at this point is to recognize that we have a practical approach that can get us through this, and not just get us through this so that we survive, but get us through this so that we take down the existing system and replace it with a new system. And so that is ultimately the purpose of the channel, because it's wonderful to be informed, and thank God we are. But without a way forward, without designing a way out of here, without finding a way out of here, we're in a disaster movie without a happy ending. Now, is it obvious that there's a way out of this? Well, as I said, there are three obvious solutions: mass awakening, divine intervention, alien intervention. Great, but not exactly the kind of practical measures that we can really focus on day to day. So do we have measures that we could take? Is there a path out of here? And I can think of at least two. And I think what's important about this is that it doesn't matter if these are impractical. It doesn't matter if these are going to take centuries. Because once you can find one, or as I see it, I've two come to mind immediately. Once you can see a way out of this, despite all the control, all the wealth, all the power being in their hands, then there is hope. Then, hopefully, it can inspire others to, even if they disagree with my observations, my suggestions as to possible ways forward. Hopefully it will inspire others to improve, to refine, and to operate from a sense of hope to move forward. And so that ultimately is the purpose of this channel. And it's also why I'm going to be, should we say, doing this, because it's in my nature to leave other people to do the things that they're good at, and then to address the issues that appear intractable to other people. So this channel may not be about day-to-day news on updates on Ukraine. The Duran is doing a wonderful job on that. Patrick Lancaster, etc. It may not be on the Max and COVID any longer. People like Dr. Merkler and Kennedy and many others are doing a wonderful job of that. And shout out to Amazing Polly. I mean, she was brilliant and continues to be brilliant, I hope. But what no one is really, or I say no one, I mean maybe there are out there, but what very few people can see clearly at the moment is a way out of this where we actually win. And so that is where I've put my focus, and that ultimately is the purpose of this channel. How can we get out of the current situation, the current crisis, in a way that we build, as the channel is named, a fair and better society, despite all the power, all the wealth, all the control being in the hands of an elite doing the harm. So there you go. I do hope you'll follow what we're doing, and I hope you'll not just contribute, not just share, but contribute your thinking, and because this is going to be something we have to design together, and it's going to be something which we have to evolve, and which hopefully, if we can seed it correctly, it will flourish. And I'll touch on that rather gives a hint as to one of the ways out of this, which is to look at the way that religion takes over. The Roman Empire was indisputably overwhelming and dominant in terms of its power. But someone came along and said, render unto Caesar. And in due course, it took 300 years or whatever it was, but 300, 400 years later, the church owned that empire, and it became the Holy Roman Empire, the Christian Empire. So, it may not be our lifetime, and that is only one of two possible ways out of this, but it is possible to conceive of evolving to a very different society despite everything that appears to be against us. So that's why we're here, that's what we're going to be focused on, and hopefully you'll be part of that story. Thanks very much.